Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I'm going live about now. God, I did not want to stream today. I definitely did not plan to. As I promised you multiple times over the last couple of streams, I do want to do more other types of content. But today it was actually really, really important for me to stream to get all your opinions, your agreements, your disagreements, because we have actually what many, many people feared, which is Apple today announced some huge price increases. I already see Plasma Void in the chat. Rosa saying hi. Hi to everyone. I know I told you that I won't be back, so I apologize if you later find the video and like, WTF, Mark said he's only streaming next week. That's because we have 33 degrees Celsius today, 35 tomorrow, 37 the day after that, and 39 to 41 on Sunday. So I wanted to actually take it easy, just relax after work. Today was thankfully a pretty short work day by my standards. And while I was actually reading up on some news by the end of my workday, I was like, what is this giant like Apple stuff that's coming like 20 times on Twitter? You know, when there's like one big piece of news, everybody posted from like the big sites like 9to5Mac, Mac Rumors, but also every Apple YouTuber, every tech YouTuber, right? And I'm like, price increase on Macs, price increase on iPads. And I'm looking, is there a price increase on iPhone? Because iPhone was kind of the thing we discussed most. If you remember the Wall Street Journal article that we, well, it's not the full article we reacted to, but the summary of it that we reacted to, right, which suggested like a $13.99 price for the iPhone, which wouldn't actually be too crazy now that we saw how much, for example, the iPad Pro and the MacBooks have gone up in price. But the iPhone has not gone up in price at all, and that's why I was waiting. Maybe there would be some other refreshes, but I would doubt that Apple would do multiple price increases over the day. They would just launch all of them at once. And ladies and gentlemen, now we are here. Now Apple has launched price increases across MacBook, iPads, HomePod, Apple TV, and even Apple Vision Pro. And I'm sure there is stuff that I might have missed. We'll get through individually all the price increases and discuss if the products are still worth it. Mind you that today we did not get any kind of product refreshes. We did not get new processors. We did not get new RAM or storage configurations. So these are purely price increases, unlike even the Mac Mini, where Apple removed the $599 starting price with the 256 gigabyte configuration. They kept the entry price for the 512 gigabyte version, or just the price. I mean, it's now the entry price, but it didn't used to be. They kept that price the same, right? And then think about the price increase on something like the MacBook Air, which unfortunately, yes, we do now have another one, but it went from $999 to $1099, but it also got double the storage at that price. And the year before that, with the M4 MacBook Air, it actually became $100 less expensive, and it standardized 16 gigabytes of RAM. So there was a lot of good stuff happening, even with slight price increases. These are now all basically universally bad news, right? Price increases, no product refreshes right now, nothing like really to compensate for that. Now, we do know what is to blame here. These are the RAM and storage price increases from the AI boom. All of these components, NAND storage modules, LPDDR5X RAM modules, all of those are in high demand for AI servers. Companies like Google, OpenAI, Anthropic, they're buying these components up in the tens of billions of dollars in terms of volume. When you combine it all, we are literally talking close to $1 trillion of investments in that one category. Mind you, still, regular servers are still being built. Regular smartphone, tablets, laptops are still being built, right? And we have more smart tech in general in our lives, from smart TVs to smart smart fridges. So these components are in incredibly high demand, and some of them have doubled in price. We recently had a report that Apple is paying like 90% more for the 12 gigabytes of RAM that are inside the iPhone 17 Pro. We also heard that prices are going to increase even further. They have already tripled and quadrupled depending on the exact spec we are looking at. LPDDR has been less affected than DDR5, for example, but LPDDR is now slowly doing the same thing. So yeah, a lot of craziness, and I think it really behooves us to go through all of this. Interestingly enough is that Apple did not change the upgrade path for the devices. So they did not start charging more per 8 or 16 gigabytes of RAM, per 512 gigabytes or 1 terabyte of extra storage. These are all still the same $200, $400, depending on what kind of upgrade we are talking about. And that means that a lot of the burden is now on the base configurations to absorb all those price increases. And yeah, this is why all these articles also state that we are not just getting price increases. I mean, I call them massive in my title. I call them huge in my thumbnail. And Mac Rumors calls them dramatic, which I totally agree with. Like, I was even walking from work and I quickly called in my grandma to ask her about the heat and everything, how she is doing. And I was like mentioning, oh, I actually have to do a stream today. It's kind of like an emergency, a big topic. And once she found out about those kinds of price increases, she was like, well, cannot Apple, like one of the most profitable companies in the world, absorb it? And I'm like, well, technically they could, but margins would definitely be hurt severely. But then we see on something like the iPhone 17 generation where Apple clearly is not absorbing, where Apple clearly is absorbing the prices, especially on something like the $800 iPhone 17, which quickly is becoming one of the best deals, not just in smartphones, but in technology in general, I guess. Yeah, but let's get through this. And respect to Mac Rumors for this dramatic Apple logo here. Apple after temporarily taking it down earlier today, Apple's online store is back up. If you know, the Apple Store, Apple's online store goes down whenever there are big news coming in, a big product refresh, a brand new product category, big price changes, which usually never happens across the board. Apple can obviously make smaller changes on the store without taking it down. The reason why they took it down before is because these changes are very, very massive. In terms of percentages, nominal value, however you want to see it, some products are more dramatic than others. But then even when you look, for example, at something like the HomePod Mini, right? That one went up $30. But that's actually over 30%. It's like 31% of its price has gone up, right? So that's actually one of the more significant price increases in terms of percentage. And mind you, the HomePod Mini is powered by an ancient Apple Watch chip that has little RAM, little storage, right? But we know why this is happening, and that's because we know the next HomePod Mini is clearly coming along with a better chip. It's clearly going to have some kind of ability to interact with Siri AI. It's probably not going to be fully locally. It's probably going to depend a lot on the servers and your own iPhone or iPad in the room, right? But clearly the next HomePod Mini is going to be more expensive to build. And that's why we are already seeing the price increase. My speculation for this is that Tim Cook is basically taking the hit. He is still the CEO. September 1st is when John Ternus takes over. We obviously know that in September we are getting the iPhone 18 Pro, we are getting the iPhone Ultra, we're expecting a massive MacBook Pro redesign with the first touchscreen on the MacBook, we're expecting an M6 iPad Pro with vapor chamber cooling, and all of that is gonna make those products not only better, but realistically more expensive to build, even if we ignore the RAM and storage price pressure. But very clearly, they do not want to increase prices once the new updates come around, because now reviews will suffer from, well, it's 20% more expensive than the last generation, it better be better, right? But now it won't be 20% more expensive than the last generation. It's going to come in at the same price. It's just that the price has been changed. Ladies and gentlemen, I've done a lot of intro rambling. I've already covered some details even, but before we get fully into it, I want to give you a plea to do the YouTube jazz, as we call it around here. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it out with anybody who you think might enjoy it. Comment. I love interacting with your comments. You can also become a permanent supporter of the channel by becoming a YouTube member. Shout out to Angelica, Steve, Max, Maximus, and Jonathan, our MacTech Pro Max member. Shout out to Denise, our MacTech Pro member. Shout out to KSB Wonders, our MacTech Neo member. And of course, you can also join the Patreon, join the Discord. I even shared the link to the Discord in the chat today. I really want to know what you think about these price increases and whether you think the products are still worth it. I apologize for starting the stream at an earlier time than I usually do. I know for people watching from the US or the UK, that's far from ideal. Many of you are still at work, or it's so early, maybe you're still waking up or something like that, or you're just going to work. But of course, you can watch the video now or later as a VOD. It all helps the channel. Thank you very, very much. So I already covered the HomePod Mini. The regular HomePod is back to its initial price. So that's the price at which I actually bought my first generation HomePod Biggie, as I lovingly call it. It went up from $299 to $349, so $50. So 1/6 of the price. Definitely not great, but percentage-wise, it's actually a far smaller increase than what you see on the HomePod Mini, for example. An absolutely insane increase is happening on the Apple TV side, and that suggests to me very clearly that we are seeing a big chip upgrade from the A15 to some kind of A18 processor, and also a massive increase in memory capacity from 8 gigabytes to from 4 gigabytes to 8. I wouldn't even be surprised if storage or something like that also changed, and maybe the next version came like with 256 gig standards or something like that. Apple uses pretty slow, outdated, but still SSD storage on Apple TV, so that is very cheap, but clearly not cheap enough to accept a 129 price. Yeah, Ziggy, you're right. The component wars are hitting everywhere, and this is actually more intensive than I had expected. Now, I'll be honest, I actually am not too surprised by some of the bigger price increases. It's some of the smaller one that stuck out to me. KSB Wonders joining the chat. You already got the shout out for being a MacTech Neo member today. Because with the Apple TV, I kind of expected once it gets Apple Intelligence, because the current Apple TV, for example, does not support any form of Apple Intelligence, and now we would be looking at an Apple TV that supports the new Siri AI. Now, it probably wouldn't get 12 gigs of RAM or something like that. That would be clearly overkill. 12 gigs of RAM by themselves already cost $150, so that wouldn't be a product that's feasible even for $199. It probably even wouldn't be feasible for like $220 or something like that. But I'm not surprised by the next Apple TV being more expensive, especially since the Apple TV has always been one of Apple's more aggressively priced products. And given that everybody who I know who has an Apple TV absolutely loves it, many people update every generation, because a new Apple TV generation only comes along like every 3 or 4 years sometimes. And they're so cheap that it basically doesn't matter. You'll just connect it to a second TV that you have somewhere around in your home, or to your kids' TV, or you'll give it to some family member. That's how I do it, and I know that's how some of you have done it. So this actually isn't surprising. Similar with the HomePods. Actually, I would have thought that Apple might have gone for slightly more like round prices, like something like 119 to say it's 120. But then again, it's $10, and Apple clearly is not just pricing for the current RAM and storage pricing, but don't forget there are expectations that prices will still continue increases. Ziggy saying this is honestly scary. Cannot imagine prices next year. We'll have to see because. When you look, for example, at DDR5 prices, right? I actually looked that up. And a lot of those prices, even though they have drastically increased, right? Oh God, what I hate verification where you just click a button, right? And you can see that the prices have mostly stagnated now for the last half year. Sometimes you will ask, well, prices still have increased at my local store and something like that. Well, that's because maybe your local store actually had some RAM inventory and now it's and now it had to replace that old cheaper RAM and storage with something new. Now that's DDR4. Obviously, we are more interested in something like DDR5. This should be a good configuration. DDR5 6000, 32 gigabytes of it, right? You see, it hasn't obviously yet come down in price, though I have seen, for example, a lot more deals on storage. Like, remember when there was like that crazy $3,000 8 terabyte PS5 optimized storage that recently come out? I actually looked at the Samsung 9100 Pro, which is actually PCIe 5, not PCIe 4, and for the 8 terabyte version actually cost 1,500 euros, so half the cost of that in dollar. And even the version with an integrated cooler was $1,600, even though the cooler probably cost them like $5 to put on. So I wouldn't actually bet on prices further increasing, but I'm also not really betting my money on them significantly coming down. Yeah, old inventory, but old inventory has also already disappeared, right? Don't forget, Apple's inventory for, let's say, DDR5, LPDDR5X 9600, that one has already been used up, right? Especially with how popular the iPhone 17 generation has been, right? So it's not like Apple has had massive inventory of previous generation RAM or storage that they're only now buying up. Apple bought faster NAND modules for the PCIe 5 enabled MacBook Pros. Apple bought faster RAM for the 9600 mega transfers on the iPhone Pro and the M5 devices, right? So I wouldn't necessarily bet on it getting much worse. And don't forget, Apple is already pricing in some future fluctuations as well. This is not a price increase that will be immediately increased further. This is a price increase that's designed to stay and maybe even come down. And before you say, well, you know how big companies are, once prices are high, they tend to keep them higher. Well, my counter argument to that is the MacBook Air, right? Think about the M2 MacBook Air increased prices, right, because of the redesign. M3 kept the prices despite keeping the same storage and RAM configurations. But then the M4 came out. That one actually reduced prices and doubled the RAM. Technically, the M3 already doubled the RAM in like a mid-gen or late-gen cycle refresh, but that's a different discussion, right? And then the M5 MacBook Air came along, and that one gave you double the storage for quote-unquote only $100 more. And mind you, that was while Apple actually doubled the storage speed. So that storage wasn't actually cheaper for Apple in any way, which sometimes Apple does that. Apple will, obviously, when you think about the M2, one thing that really sucked about that MacBook Air was not just that it increased in price, but that its 256 gigabyte storage variant actually got half the storage speed. And slow storage is one way, for example, how Apple keeps the MacBook Neo pricing low, because they're using storage in there that's 4 to 5 times less performant than what you get on the MacBook Air. And it's like 10 times less performant than what you get on the MacBook Pro. So very clearly, it's not just capacity that's to blame, it's also exact specifications and things like that. Did I pre-order GTA 6? I see no reason to pre-order it right now. If it turns out I like future trailers and everything, I'll just pre-order it like a week before launch and still get all the benefits of a pre-order. I'm not spending $100 because I'm not buying the €80 version either, right? I want the full GTA 6 experience, but before that, I want to see what are the exact PS5 Pro optimizations and things like that. Does it actually have a 60 FPS mode? Will there be an in-depth Digital Foundry breakdown? And it's not that graphics are so important to me, but if it doesn't at least have like a solid 40 FPS mode, I'm out. Like, I'm not playing games at 30 FPS anymore unless it would be like my favorite game franchise ever, and suddenly it needs to be 30 FPS, which thankfully is not happening with my actual favorite gaming franchise, which is God of War, because God of War Laufey is pretty much 100% getting 60 FPS mode. Also likely like a VRR enabled frame rate mode and stuff like that. Yeah, Ziggy, yeah, no reason for you to pre-order either. And don't forget, you are not right now. You're just feeding the beast, right? They've done a ton of weird stuff, like only physical editions with a digital code inside. All that lockdowns from the $80 version to the $100 version. Like, you cannot do tattoos or car customizations or haircuts, or at least not everything, right? Very weird single player lockdowns. It's not like you even get like an extra story or something, like a DLC that's built in. You're literally just cut off from some content that doesn't even cost them that much. You also get like pre-order bonuses like GTA Online or GTA Plus, right, for a month. But that one is also very scummy too, because you actually are locked into GTA Online Plus at that point, right? Which means if you don't cancel the subscription, it will auto-renew after you bought it. So if you're not careful, you will just end up giving Rockstar more money. And GTA Online 2 is a separate release from this. So you are not even getting the next GTA Online for free with the 80 or $100 purchase. I don't fall into hype anymore, not longer puppy dog best on PS5. The PS5 optimizations are the controller stuff, haptic feedback, adaptive triggers. It's the Tempest engine for audio processing. The Xbox also has custom hardware to deal with audio, but apparently I would bet that it's basically as well optimized on Xbox as possible too, but the PS5 has some hardware that allows it to stretch its legs a little more. Like, it's fast, way faster SSD than what's on the Xbox, over twice as fast, and it's even faster media engine for, sorry, not media engine, it's compression engine for decompression and compression of data, which gives you like 5 to 16 gigabytes of data per second. $100 for full game, $80 for Temu version. Yeah, kind of. But you see that like pricing in general right now is crazy. And even now, like, oil prices are coming down a little, but don't forget, like, but we don't know if like the war will actually end. We don't know what the actual supply is going to look like, because the war might end, but the Strait of Hormuz might still end up being closed with how unstable the position is. So there is so much pressure on all these companies to make as much profit as possible, because there's this understanding that money is becoming less worth, right? We recently had like 4% inflation in the United States. That means that if you want to make $100 as a company, in order to please investors, you kind of have to make $104. So it at least looks to them like you're meeting expectations. So I'm not defending this, I'm just contextualizing it. In fact, once we get through the individual upgrades, there's actually a lot in here that I disagree with Apple. But yeah. Gold and silver prices dropped big over the last few months. Yeah, but that's because they were in a bubble, right? They basically had their Bitcoin moment. The gold especially like shot up like what was it, 4 times or something like that over a few years, and most of that came over like 6 months or something like that. It basically doubled over a short period of time. So they had to drop, and these kinds of fluctuations also with companies is like, oh well, gold and silver dropped, so maybe some supplies are getting cheaper, but oil went up and now it's kind of coming down. Natural gas came up because of, for example, the Russia-Ukraine war, but that is also now down, right? But because there's constantly a new wave of fluctuation, a new wave of price increases, companies are not giving back those gains, right? Because they're like, look, maybe we'll like we can absorb it for a time, then we have to drastically increase, but also don't expect us to now drastically decrease it, because just as we ate the initial cost increases, now we actually want to benefit from those cost increases. KSP, I was so hyped that I was about to pull the trigger on buying a console. Well, I think you should buy a console. Like, in fact, when I look at something like the Steam Machine pricing and the Apple price increases, honestly, the PS5 at $600, and here in Europe, I looked it up, it's 550 euros for the digital version with actually the full terabyte on Amazon. I would buy that. Like, I know that I've said myself that like I expect a PS6 like in 1.5 years, but that one is probably going to be $900. HTC One M7, one of my favorites. Smartphone designs, join the chat saying hello, haven't seen you in a while. I have to drink my Coke relatively fast because it's so warm. It's already piss warm. So we went through this basically as some extra context. Guys, I see many of you are joining. Please like the video if you haven't yet done so. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more. Leave a super chat or super sticker as a small donation to help me along. Riley, our usual #1 yapper, joining now as #3, saying, I listen to Mark rap as I hear the sad news. Wait, I think you mean rap as in recap or something like that. KSP Wonder saying, oh, you have a PC. Well, yeah, that's a different discussion. True. HTC was the best. No, but, well, they were the best in the Android sphere. That I actually fully agree. They made some weird decisions early on, even with those beautifully designed One M7, HTC One M7, M8, M9. They had like those 4-megapixel cameras, but like with really large pixels. But overall, yeah, I like their user interface more than Samsung. They were way faster than TouchWiz back in the day. Yeah, HTC, you were right. You were here last during WWDC. Well, welcome back. Again, I do understand, like, some of the best supporters of this channel basically never watch me live. I actually had, with 2 of them, I had communications outside of the chats and stuff like that, because YouTube now allows actually private messages, I found out. And yeah, they talked to me about some of their private life and how busy they are, and I was telling them, I'm in the medical field myself. It's actually quite the exemption that until like next May, I have like a relatively nice working schedule and things like that. Yeah, so I'm very glad to see any of you. Sorry, whatever, I'll allow cookies. I just hate that blue banner here. So let's continue. So HomePod Mini, big HomePod, Apple TV. So these are all products that currently don't support any form of Apple Intelligence and will support, obviously, the new Siri AI. So there's a lot of stuff coming in here to increase the price, to get those products ready. The same thing goes for the base iPad, right? $100 is almost a 30% increase here. It's quite significant. If you actually remember, this was actually the price before Apple did a price reduction. So Apple does price reductions when they see that a product does not sell. And I really hope that some of these products do not sell at these new prices. And I'll admit, this is one of those products. Now, I cannot tell you about the iPad 11 or to be exact, about the iPad 12, right? Because if we look at the this iPad, right? Some things it has. It has the A16 chip. It has 6 gigs of RAM. We know the next one is going to update it to an A18 processor, most likely 8 gigs of RAM. And if that's all that happens, I'll be honest, I think it's a shitty thing to ask $100 more for it. I think a $50 price increase would have been nicer. However, there is a chance that the technical upgrade ends up being more significant for the iPad 12. One thing, for example, would be to finally let it support the Apple Pencil Pro. And forget about the Apple Pencil first generation. Give it a faster port or something like that. Now, that will be difficult if it doesn't get an A Pro chip, but still, right, give it a better cooling, because this device sometimes struggles to even nicely cool an A16 chip. It's really not nicely integrated into the big aluminum chassis. Will there be probably some significantly better camera upgrades? Might it finally have a laminated screen? But again, I cannot tell you these things as like excuses for the price increase, because we are getting these price increases on already existing hardware. And part of that is to prepare us for those new devices and to let those new products shine, because they now launch with all these better specs, technically without a price increase under John Turnus. So basically Tim Cook is taking the blame, which is kind of admirable here. They could have pushed all those price increases up until the refreshes. HTC 1M7, you're saying you're just glad that I bought my first MacBook at the right time. Fully understandable. I'm now actually really wondering if I will even consider buying like an M6 MacBook Pro, and I might just push my M1 Max up until the M7 generation. And now with those price increases, well, again, money is not the biggest concern, but now I'm actually not sure if I would consider buying an iPad Pro and an iPad and a MacBook Pro together, right? Which is currently my setup. I have an M1 iPad Pro and an M1 Max MacBook Pro, right? If Apple gives the MacBooks a touchscreen, could I get away with like a smaller, cheaper iPad? We'll later get to iPad mini rumors. Yeah, so that's part of it. KSP, purchasing a console when I already own a PC isn't economically prudent on my part. Oh, I totally understand that. I thought you didn't have any major gaming hardware for a second. But yeah, you had a 5070 Ti, right? Hopefully it will be cooled down after seeing the summer sale. Yeah, yeah. Like the summer sales and everything have kind of become a joke. The Amazon Prime days are not what they used to be. The Steam summer sales are not what they used to be. In fact, I would argue that the PlayStation price drops on games have actually become more attractive than they used to be. They're still worse in a way than the Steam summer sales, but the Steam summer sales used to be like a cultural milestone every year, right? Games would drop into like the $3-4 range, and I'm talking not 10-15-year-old games. I'm talking 2-3-year-old games. Unfortunately, can't get a PC at a good price anymore. Oh yeah, and it might not be getting better either in that regard. Yeah, so it's unfortunate. So this is the base iPad story. I have to tell you because I'll be commenting on each individual product here. So with these price increases, do not buy these 4 products, right, at all, would be basically my preparation for that. Like, you're getting, like, with the base iPad, I could even say wait until you could get maybe it like on a huge discount, maybe some kind of refurbished or just discounted sale for inventory, right? But look at it for being like $250 or something like that at that point. When I'm talking about this generation iPad. But all of these devices, my first recommendation is just wait until they're refreshed. I could make a similar recommendation for the base Apple TV, because if you really don't care about Siri on it that much, my recommendation here would be you can look at this A15 generation Apple TV. If you can get it at around $100. Again, discounted. Somebody sells it from inventory. Otherwise, just spend the extra money, get something that's much more future-proof, has all the software capabilities. We've seen with the Apple Watch that sometimes even relatively recent models can get dropped from new software if Apple deems that it's time and they build a new OS completely around a new paradigm, like a new Siri, right? So I'm not saying that this Apple TV is going to be cut necessarily anytime soon, but let's say it's going to get cut in 2 or 3 years. Meanwhile, the Apple TV that's coming out later this year, that one is most likely getting support for like 7 or 8 years. So just for some context. Student discount on the MacBook Neo is way better deal than the iPad? Yes. Especially if you know what you're using it for. Like the iPad Air here, we'll get to that because God, do I have an issue with that. But let's move here actually in terms of pricing. From the base iPad, our next exploration hits the iPad mini. That one is getting the same $100 price increase as the base iPad. But of course, it started at almost double the price, right? Well, not quite, but it used to start. No, it started at 50% more, right? So it was $499. Now it comes at $599. I will actually say these are. This should be here, right? So basically, this should have been a price increase where the base 128 gigabyte version is essentially cut, and you get the 256 gigabyte configuration for the previous price, and that would make the 256 gigabytes $599. If you really wanted to stretch it, I would have made the 256 gigabyte version something like $649, which I still think would be a better deal than 128 gigabytes at $299. I think it would have allowed Apple to simplify the lineup. But again, we are still talking about the current generation iPad mini. We'll get to, in fact, we can actually get to that right now. Apple plans an OLED iPad mini, and we know that this will be the first wave of cheaper OLED iPads. We obviously already have the very expensive tandem OLED iPad Pros. We know that sometime next year or the year after, Apple plans to give OLED to the iPad Airs as well. Meanwhile, the iPad mini is and obviously we know that the base iPad will not be getting OLED anytime soon for cost reasons. So the iPad mini it is. And seemingly, we also know, of course, that it's supposedly getting a big redesign with slimmer bezels, with a slightly larger screen. It will be getting a waterproof design, and it will get stereo speakers that use like a vibration effect of the actual iPad surface rather than have traditional speakers. And with that, it will become waterproof. So there's a lot happening with the iPad mini, and according to Korean language ETA News, which often reports on stuff that Samsung and LG do, Samsung Display started mass production of OLED panels for Apple's first OLED iPad mini this month. The report adds that production of OLED panels for the MacBook Pro is scheduled to begin in July. Obviously, we know MacBook Pros are getting the tandem OLED technology that the iPad Pro has had for a while, coinciding with the startup of Samsung's new 8.6 generation OLED production line. It should be said that the iPad mini is not expected to be getting this kind of massive technological upgrade to like a tandem OLED Pro Motion display. It might not even have LTPO, but rather an LTPS panel. So while that will make it more expensive than the LCD version, and it will definitely help it with issues like the slow refresh rate of the LCD panel, and it will give it better contrast and better efficiency, and the screen will be thinner, so they might make the device even thinner, or they might give it a larger battery inside or something like that. But it's not going to be the technologically most revolutionary OLED screen we've ever seen on a tablet. Far from it. Riley, as in 3 times till I catch up to the stream. Okay, Riley, good. Have fun speeding me up. HTC, as for the MacBook Air, I think refurbished might be a good choice. It always is. But mind you, Apple has already increased the prices on the refurbished models as well. So here, this is the first product where I'm not saying buy this version, right? But this is actually the version where I would say if when the next generation comes out, and if it's still $599, if God allows, if it actually becomes $599, but somehow with more storage baked in or something like that, get it. Because at that point, I'm not sure if future price increases would make it worse. Now, I know this is already a 20% price increase. I'm not saying that this is super generous from Apple. But I'm not sure, like with an OLED redesign and everything. I know iPad mini is not known to be the best value anyway, because so few people just like that form factor. But this is the first product that to me is not egregiously priced. Now, again, I'm talking about a future refresh. The current generation, obviously, it sucks that a device with, what chip does the iPad mini have? Is it an A17 Pro? Or is it an A15 Pro? I'm sorry. No. Wait. A17 Pro, right. And it has 8 gigs of RAM. So the RAM amount might actually not change or something like that. And that's why the price increase is not actually that crazy, right? The price increase is basically mainly for the OLED, and well, in a way, the next one will still be more expensive because new 8 gigabytes will be more expensive than previous 8 gigabytes. Even the same 128 gigabytes, if they don't double the base storage, will still be more expensive. But yeah, primarily Apple is preparing this for OLED, and this is where I'll tell you, this is one of the products where I would actually say that this price increase would be fair even without the crazy situation on the market. Again, something like the Apple TV, the HomePod, the base iPad, all of this is only somewhat acceptable in the context of the craziness of like the AI, RAM, and storage apocalypse. The iPad mini, especially if it gets 256 gigs with the next version, but also just from OLED alone, this is one of the more acceptable upgrades here. Now, one upgrade that is absolutely not fucking acceptable to me whatsoever is the iPad Air becoming $150 more expensive. Now, I know percentage-wise, it's not that different from the change for the iPad mini, though still, it was $600, now it's $750. That's more than that. What is it like? 23% or something like that. 750 divided by 600. It's 25%, right? So again, the difference is not that much, but the iPad Air is already very weird here, in my opinion, because the iPad Air's 128 gig, like to me, at that point, it would have been better if Apple had just increased its price by $200, but finally cut off this stupid 128 gigabyte configuration, right? But mind you, the iPad Air is also something that we expect to see get an OLED update. Now, this one is not coming this year. That one is probably coming sometime next year. So you will have to wait longer. But this is a product I 100% can tell you, do not buy with the current specs and limitations. Look for like a last gen M3 iPad Air or something like that. It's not like the iPad can even cool its chips that well. Look for an older iPad Pro or something like that. This is or maybe with this gen, maybe some store will sell you like the 256 gigabyte version for $749 or something like that. At that point, you might consider it. But no, these are actually bad prices. And you guys know I'm more understanding than most of the pressure that these companies faced. I don't excuse it, but I will not like pretend like I'm not aware of it, right? Like some people do. This is actually bad pricing because from the get-go, even before the current RAM and storage apocalypse, 128 gigabytes was terrible on the iPad Air. Like at least with the iPad mini, you could argue it's such a small product, right? It's not the greatest value at $500, but if you really want a small form factor, there isn't actually that much competition. with the iPad Air, because of so many previous generation products and iPad Pros where it kind of overlaps, like when you think about the used, discounted, or even refurbished M4 iPad Pro, that will be better in every way than this device, and it will probably be now a similar price. Now, again, I know Apple has also increased like their refurbished prices, and I know that sites like Amazon, eBay, they're about to update their own pricing as well. But you will be able to find something at a much better deal than this. Don't buy this at MSRP. And while with the other products, I know that we are getting refreshes soon, right? Like iPad mini, iPad Air, these are happening this year most likely. All of these products are basically 100. Like the big HomePod is a bit questionable, but we're also getting a HomePad, right? So there is a lot happening here. $700 for a previous generation chip, 60 hertz and 120. Yeah, like the iPad Air was already, and mind you, this isn't even $700. It's $750. So yeah, this one is absolutely unacceptable. If Apple had to increase prices, imagine the struggle of value behind sourcing parts. Yeah, and that's because like I would actually expect prices to drop really, really hard once the AI bubble bursts, and I actually do think it's gonna burst. Maybe it's not gonna disappear or be as intensive as like the .com bubble, because don't forget, many companies actually survived the .com bubble, and they kept making big internet businesses. It's just that pets.com, right, was not ever going to be the next Google. And with AI, some of that will happen too. Like, and over time, these companies will just have to, and with regulations and everything else, with storage, with potential communities not allowing storage servers to be built. Sorry, my brain. I lost so much water today. So after drinking the Coke, this is now my next supply of water. You will actually have to forgive me if I have to go to the bathroom in the midway through the stream. Yeah, Valve really here is completely screwed because Valve does not even have any kind of mass order benefit. They're not an established company. Partner for the likes of Samsung, SK Hynix, Micron, right? They're also not really sure what the exact demand on, is going to be on something like the Steam machine. Apple has a much, much better understanding, not only of logistics in general, but also of how well their devices sell. Obviously, they do not overproduce by like 50% the amount of stuff that they make. They don't underproduce it so that we're constantly in total shortages. So Apple has massive advantages, but these advantages to me primarily come not even just from the economy of scale. Obviously, that's a huge thing with Apple, but also from the competence of Apple's team. And that's because Apple is obviously doing hardware much longer, much more intensively, and much more successfully than Valve. Yeah, so iPad Air here to me is the first total flop. You can get it again if you get some kind of huge discount. We are talking MSRP or very slight discounts, because for example, when you look at the MacBook Pro, that product is very often discounted by like 10%, 20%, sometimes even on Amazon. So when I'm talking about pricing, I'm primarily commenting on this. By the way, this also to me suggests that I'll actually take back what I said before. We'll get to this a little bit later. But I said that I don't think that the MacBook Pro entry level, the M6, is gonna get tandem OLED. I actually totally take that back now. I think the M6, the M6 Pro, and the M6 Max MacBook Pro will all get tandem OLED. I also think there will not be any kind of ultra redesign, rebranding here. I think Apple is fine with the Pro branding, and they're very clearly fine with pricing the Pros at the premium price. They might reduce prices in the future by like $100 or so, but with tandem OLED now becoming an extra component to consider, a internal redesign, potentially vapor chambers, including with the cooling system, I would never expect pricing to be back to like $1699. On something like the MacBook Air, I could actually over time see prices going back to this, as but honestly, this what I could see happening is I could see Apple make the MacBook Neo more attractive over time, right? Maybe make it an $800 device, but now it has a way better chip, better cooling, a larger battery, right? Smaller bezels on the screen. It's much closer, what I mean, to what the MacBook Air will be. But then the MacBook Air gets an OLED screen, it gets ProMotion, right? And then the MacBook Pro stands out with better chips, better cooling, the best possible screen, better speaker systems, and of course the option to upgrade it with some crazy specs beyond this, right? So here, unfortunately, but again, we'll get to that, because after the iPad Air, we are getting to the iPad Pro, and unfortunately, my take on the iPad Pro is not that much better than on the iPad Air. Thankfully, the price increase is only 20% rather than 25% for the 11-inch version. I think for the 13-inch version, that price increase is far less substantial now, because we're looking at $1,500 versus $1,300. So that's a 15% price increase. But I'll have to say, get this if you can get the 512 gigabyte version for the price of the 256. So unlike with the iPad Air, well, I'll just tell you to look into completely different products. Now with the iPad Pro, I can also tell you, look into the M4 version, but don't forget, with the M4 version, that one only comes with 8 gigs of RAM. And so if you're looking at that one with 256 and 512 gigs of version, that one is not just different or last gen, it's actually gonna be worse. If you're looking at the previous 1 terabyte configuration or something like that, that will give you also 16 gigs of RAM, not even 12. So that if you can get this for like a $400, $500, even $600 price difference to this 1 terabyte configuration, get that. But here, I really would encourage to look at least into discounts where you can save $200. HC107, I'm such a dire need for a gaming PC. Well, yeah, you probably had some hopes riding on the Steam machine, but I guess that kind of didn't pan out for most people, unfortunately. Yeah, so the iPad Pro, again, that's because I like the iPad Pro way more than most people, but the percentage increase, especially on the 13-inch version, is not that terrible. Look for a $200 discount. You should be able to find that on Amazon. Don't buy from Apple here. And if you're willing to wait, maybe you have some very nicely working iPads, wait for the M6 version, because I'll actually say with a good maybe Apple will finally increase base storage on there. I mean, this is now more expensive than the MacBook Air with with half the storage, right? So hopefully Apple will bring it up to 512 gigabytes, M6 chip, vapor chamber. I think that will be quite worth it. I actually think that Apple here is just unequivocally making more money of these devices at the new prices. This is not just compensating for price increases. 12 gigs of RAM have not gone up in price. Like 12 gigs of RAM have probably become $70 more expensive than they were before, and 256 gigabytes have probably become like $15 to at most $25 more expensive than they were before. And that's me being awfully generous. I think it might actually just be like $10 given the prices that Apple gets for these entry-level configurations. So at most, the build cost has gone up by $100, but the price for us suckers as consumers has increased by $200. So this is Apple definitively making more money, and there is nothing in the iPad Pro roadmap that suggests that it's going to be dramatically more expensive to build. Again, if Apple replaces this configuration with M6 vapor chamber cooling and two C2X modems, and gives it 512 gigs of storage and hopefully 16 gigs of RAM, I would actually recommend it. The 11-inch version, I do recommend it less in general. I think it's a worse, even though you save $300, I do think that it's kind of in this nomad's land where it's just not productive enough for these prices, and it's not small enough to be truly groundbreaking in its form factor, like even like the iPad mini or like a foldable iPhone. So yeah, here I'm a little bit nicer than on the iPad Air and the base iPad. Kind of similar to how I stand on the iPad mini, which is, especially if Apple changes some of the storage situation with the next gen, buy the next gen. And if you're willing, because the M5 iPad Pro is still a fantastic piece of hardware, look for it with a discount. Previously, I would recommend, instead of buying it at MSRP of $999, wait for it to be like $850 or something like that, or basically you can scale that up for whatever configurations you want. Now, instead of saying buy it at $1199, I would say wait until you can get it at the old $999. The iPad Pro makes so much more sense than the iPad Air. Yeah, but that's because the iPad Air, well, the iPad Pro has so many spec points that we care about as nerds, right? ProMotion, tandem OLED, perfect contrast, right? Better cooling for the chip. Even though the iPad Pro does not yet have vapor chamber, it cools its M5 chip way better than the iPad Air cools its M4 chip. So yeah, there is the quad speaker system, but most people will just prefer to save the money, right? 450, like even if you align the storage configurations and look at 256 gigabytes, that's $849 versus $1199. You're saving $350, and for many people that will be worth it. The next one, I'll actually have to say, I still think the MacBook Neo is worth it. Unfortunately, Apple did not pull any tricks here. I had hoped that they would play around, not necessarily with the MacBook Neo's storage configuration, because its 512 gigabyte version was already quite aggressive. But one thing that I would have liked to see would have been the inclusion of Touch ID on the entry-level model. I think that would have made it a much better purchase. Would it have made up for a $100 price increase? No. But I think it would have made it very attractive. Again, I know many people who don't need more than 256 gigabytes. Anything under $800 to me is fine with 256, because the market that it addresses might be super fine with just cloud storage and things like that. The 512 gigabyte version is actually pretty good still. Apple traditionally charges $200 as an upgrade for this. So the fact that it's only $100 still, again, this is very slow storage by the standards of the MacBook Air, and especially the standards of the M5 Pro and M5 Max MacBook Pro. But you're also paying half the price per gigabyte, so something kind of has to give. Plus, with that, you're also getting Touch ID. Again, I would have loved for Touch ID to be included. This is the first product here in the lineup where I unequivocally can say this $100 price increase. Again, you have to know the limitations of the MacBook Neo, right? Specifically with the 8 gigs of RAM. But if you can find your way around that, and some people will not even hit that limit. I mean, I never really hit the RAM limit on my 8 gigabytes and one iPad Pro. You'll be fine, right? I wish this would have stayed the starting price, and also with the education discount, this is actually still the starting price. So in that regard, the MacBook Neo here is the first product that I can say that price increase honestly makes sense. So, and especially since the 512 gigabyte version also now is actually a smaller price increase relatively, right? It's $100 still, but it's a smaller percentage. If you go from $599 to $699, now it's a smaller percentage, because it goes up now from $699 to $799. So yeah, especially if you want the 512 gigabyte version, I think the MacBook Neo is totally fine. One product, though, I cannot say that again about, is the MacBook Air. And now some people might say, well, why? The MacBook Air is going up the same price amount as the iPad Pro. And it actually has more RAM in its base configuration and double the storage of the iPad Pro. So it's a smaller price increase for a product that inarguably was better value to begin with. Why am I not so forgiving of the MacBook Air potentially? Well, and that's specifically if we look at MSRP, right? I do acknowledge that through sites like Amazon and other partners, you're probably never even paying the $10.99. There are plenty of deals previously that would price this product at like $9.49 or something like that. I think I've seen it once as low as like $8.99, which is an absolute steal in the current market. This is a product I can still recommend it with a significant discount, but that discount has to be quite significant. To me, it kind of has to be like $10.49. So I'm willing to accept a $100 price increase over the price I would previously recommend it at, which is around $950 to at most $1,000. Now, that gap basically is the same as the price increase. I'm not that gap is actually half the price increase. I can accept it being $100 more expensive. Please don't buy these configurations at MSRP. That's totally stupid. This is also one of those things where if Apple had done some kind of upgrade, because if you look at the 13-inch, it still comes here for the $12.99. It comes with the 8-core GPU version. So similar to how I suggested that maybe the MacBook Neo would be a better deal with Touch ID in the 256 gigabyte configuration. Here, I would have loved to see the fully enabled M5 processor. That's unfortunately not happening. Yeah. It's disappointing, but it is what it is. It's still, and of course, obviously, if we were looking not even at like an M6 update, but Apple, let's say, gave it a ProMotion screen, right? An LCD panel, nothing crazy, not asking for tandem OLED or even just basic LTPO here. LTPO LCD I'm asking for, not LTPO OLED, which is obviously a bit more expensive. So if that basically got a new screen that went up to 120 hertz, had variable refresh rate, and allowed it to also now be more efficient at playing back movies, TV shows, and adapt to games. If it got a new cooling system, even if it's just 20% better, nothing crazy, I would have been more forgiving of this. But because the MacBook Air was never the pinnacle of hardware that the iPad Pro is, right? It has nothing like the tandem OLED screen. Its quad speaker system is not as impressive for its size as the quad speaker on the iPad Pro, right? For the best Mac speakers, you move over to the MacBook Pro. Don't buy this at MSRP. It's still a good product. Don't buy it at MSRP. HC107, I bought my M5 MacBook Air when it was $10.99, so you basically got it at MSRP. Or did you not, if you mean the base configuration, that would be MSRP. Obviously, if you're looking at... if you're meaning you got like a higher end version for $10.99, maybe the 10-core version or something with more storage or something like that, then $10.99 is an absolute steal. Should I buy M5 MacBook Air base for $949? Or hold with my M2? Oh, if you already have an M2 MacBook Pro, that one is not the redesigned version, right? The M2. Because that would be the M2 Pro versions. I would actually recommend, you got student discount, so you're probably looking at a higher end configuration then. No, in this kind of way, I would just argue keep your M2, just as I'm keeping the M1 Max, right? Like, sure, because you're not getting a better screen or that much better speakers or significantly longer battery life or anything with M5. At this point, I would say wait for M6 because that could actually be transformatively more efficient, finally have a better screen, even though actually the rumors for an OLED MacBook Air point more towards a 2028 update rather than 2027. So no, my recommendation here would be to stick with the MacBook Pro you already have. So price increases. MacBook Pro. The MacBook Pro, I'll have to be honest here, this one is a bit of a mixed bag because thankfully Apple did give it more storage with the M5 generation. I wish it would have still been like 1,800, maybe some crazy $50 thing like 1,850 or something like it. Also the 16 inches, that's, what configuration is that? Oh, so one thing that I also wanted to comment on, right? If you're looking at these configurations here, right? And you're looking at the chip upgrades, for example, one thing that actually surprised me is that Apple put entirely the burden of more expensive components on the base configuration. The actual individual upgrades when it comes to adding 8 gigabytes of RAM or adding 512 or 1 terabyte of extra storage. Oh, well, no, 2 terabytes actually got more expensive. Well, fuck me then. Yeah, okay, so they made this $100 more expensive. Wait, does that change when we go to the M5 Pro? Because that one uses 2 times faster storage. No. Okay, yeah, that explains it. That's because Apple wants to keep the storage upgrades universal, and because the PCIe 5 storage might actually be more expensive, they added $100 here. For the RAM, they did not update, they did not add more money, at least not for the base version here with, I'm not familiar with every individual other upgrade, but here you paid $200 per 8 gigabytes of RAM, which is still way more than Apple pays to the suppliers. But this, I would have kind of preferred a less aggressive base configuration and then maybe a $250 upgrade path per 8 gigs of RAM. So I'm a little bit not in agreement here with Apple. Yeah. But yeah, with the MacBook Pro, how much is the M5 Pro here? That one is actually not terrible. Yeah, given the other, yeah, that one actually, the storage, the chip upgrades are still the same. I mean, that RAM upgrade is still a lot, even but with the current conditions. But obviously, Apple is kind of preparing themselves for potentially way prices or worse prices down the line. I think realistically, the better upgrades would this to be $400 and this to be an extra $200. So a combined $600 upgrade rather than $1,000. But clearly, Apple both likes their margins and wants to be prepared for future price increases. Yeah, it's not great pricing. Don't buy it at MSRP would be my recommendation. The only exclusion here would probably be something like the super high-end configurations. Now, mind you, these have gotten way more expensive. Apple is asking for more money per gigabyte of RAM on these higher-end configurations. But these are also kind of unique devices, right? Again, for this money, I really would like to see more storage. Like that $6,700 pricing would have actually been acceptable. But you can see it's still sold out mostly, right? Because of the AI demand for like devices with 64, 128 gigs of RAM. I'll say though, when the M6 version comes along, that's completely redesigned, tandem OLED. Again, I'm not saying completely redesigned is like I need the chassis to be twice as thin or anything. I actually love this design. But I'm saying about getting rid of the notch in favor of dynamic island, having a new cooling system, so maybe the 14-inch struggles less with the Max chips. And hopefully the new Max chips actually add more cores or all all chips add more cores. Like, right, the base version, in my opinion, that one should have 12 GPU cores. This one should go up to 24 GPU cores rather than 20. And this one should go up to 48 GPU cores. If that happens, it will be a better deal than this is. But unironically, you still could look into this. If you can get this at 20% less than what it costs now, basically at about the cost that it was before, I honestly think you won't be doing that badly. Because one thing that I do expect from the M6 generation is I don't actually expect it to be as heavily discounted as before. Any Apple Watch deals right now? Well, there is indirectly a deal on Apple Watches because the Apple Watch, for example, has not seen a price increase, as haven't all iPhone models, as haven't all AirPods models, which unironically makes AirPods Max sound finally kind of okay in the lineup, especially if you can really get it for $399 through certain websites. I actually think it's not, like, if you can live with that stupid bra case, it's probably not that bad, but I do understand why it still irks people to buy the AirPods Max until they finally get a redesign. With Apple Watch, my recommendation honestly is don't buy the current gen versions at anything that isn't super heavily discounted, and that's because we are going to get a massive chip improvement, finally go from 5/4 nanometer to 3 nanometer chips, brand new CPU core architecture, new neural engine cores for better handling of Siri and stuff like that. Here is one product that, regardless of price, even though prices haven't actually increased on Apple Watch, I recommend waiting. On the iPhone, I could actually see prices increasing with the next generation. On something like the iPhone 18 Pro, maybe it starts at $100 more than it did before. But on the Apple Watch, because we now saw that Apple is willing to cut so many older models from software updates, either buy one of these models at a very, very high discount or wait until the next generation would be my broad recommendation here. With AirPods, it now seems that we are not expecting AirPods 3.5, AirPods Pro 3.5 anymore this year. So, and AirPods are very often discounted to like $170, and I'm talking about AirPods Pro with an MSRP of $250. If you can get the AirPods Pro 3 at $170 to $185, $90, I would just recommend buy it, because you never know, maybe some kind of other component shortage or some crazy market volatility or another closing of international waterways will make it worse again. And if we are truly not expecting a new model, plus I don't expect a new model to even be that crazy in terms of new features, get AirPods Pro 3. Don't really look into the cheaper versions. That would be my recommendation. With iPhone, I think it's pretty self-explanatory, because you know when you want a new iPhone. The new iPhones are coming in September. When it comes to the base iPhone 17, that one is the one I most recommend to people to get. Even right now, even though it's not getting all Siri AI features because these are locked behind 12 gigabytes, but we are also not getting a base iPhone 18 up until next spring. So the base iPhone 17 is going to stick around for a nice while. It's probably not getting price increases. Apple might just increase the gap in pricing between the base 17 and then the 18 Pro, and maybe then with the base 18 they slightly increase the price, maybe by $50 or so. So that is my recommendation for all these products that have not been updated, not increased in price. Obviously, I'm much nicer to them, except for the Apple Watch, which I really think most people should wait out for the next generation and get something that's much more future-proof with an actually meaningful chip improvement. Even if they're slightly more expensive than the current gen, maybe Apple will give them twice the RAM, because all Apple Watches have used like 1 gig of RAM for like the last decade or so, or at least for the last like 6 years or so. But even if they're like $50 more expensive, or the Ultra is $100 more expensive, I still think it's better than to buy the current gen. Again, that's unless you can get the current gen at like 25% discount or something like that. Let's get to more. The iMac. This is the first product. Well, I guess with the iPad Air, I can though understand the need that some people will feel for it. The iMac is the first product here in the lineup that I can definitively claim is just a bad product now. You guys know I love most of Apple's products, or at least I understand why they are there, even if not all of them are for me. $14.99 for this product, mind you. This one starts with 256 gigabytes. Mind you, this is still an M4 chip, so it's less powerful than the MacBook Air. That base configuration is still the one with the stupid 2-port situation, and without the power adapter that gives you an Ethernet port. And it bins down both the CPU and the GPU. Now, if you had told me that Apple at least also give you finally all the goodies in that, because that was the price before for this configuration, right? That is what I would have done, because none of this has actually gone up in price. All of this has always been very, very dirt cheap for Apple to add. None of the improvements here justify a $200 price increase. The less bin chip or the unbin chip, the Ethernet port and the power adapter, the extra 2 Thunderbolt ports, none of that is worth $200 altogether. They would be a fantastic $200 improvement if this by default also meant coming with 512 gigabytes. But mind you, that is not the case. Oh, I actually see the storage has also increased here. So yeah, from 512 to 1 terabytes, you can feel it $300 more. So that's actually a 50% increase in the requirement. So and mind you, this is slower storage than what you can find on the MacBook Air, because this is PCIe 3x4 storage. The MacBook Air uses PCIe 4x4 storage, and it comes standard with 512 gigabytes. This is the first product here that in the lineup that I would say was already egregious at the previous prices, and I could never really recommend it. Now I actually have to say, mind you, because of one of the products that you will find here that has not actually increased in price, right? That is the base Mac Mini, right? Which suddenly now looks again like a much better deal inside Apple's lineup. This is where Apple cut the 256 gigabyte configuration to make it start with 512 gigabytes. Look, this is the fully unbin chip. It gets all Thunderbolt ports and HDMI ports that it needs, even an Ethernet port, the base configuration. And sure, some might say, well, you get the screen and speakers and cameras. Guys, you're paying $700 more for something that's less powerful. You can get a nice screen. Like, you can get an OLED high refresh rate screen or something like that. Yeah, thank you, Angelica. You're saying I'm keeping you guys all up to date. Well, today was really necessary because I'm keeping myself up to date. As you see, some things like the exact storage jumps and stuff like that, they were a little bit new to me. I only saw the RAM upgrades of like still being $200 per 8 gigabytes, but I see on the higher end versions, Apple has increased the per gigabyte cost there. They've also increased the upgrade cost for the 512 to 1 terabyte and 1 terabyte to 2 terabyte upgrades, and then obviously everything that's above that as well. This is where once again now something like a PC that has support for like PCIe 5 modules, that is actually now again a better value. Previously, I would argue the benefits of Apple Silicon kind of made up for that for the most part. Here, if you're actually somebody who requires a lot of storage, you're once again paying so much more for an Apple device with a lot of storage. And mind you, you do not get any of the upgradability of a PC that, while I'm not in love with the PC parts we have right now, once we get something like Intel Nova Lake and AMD Zen 6, I would argue that it will become more competitive again for Apple. But that being said, the base Mac Mini is still a good deal here. The M4 Pro has gone up in price. That's because it previously did not go up in price. $200 more. Not my favorite thing, mind you, because but if this one is updated to M5 Pro, I think it will be fine, right? It's not going to be magically the best value ever, but it's going to be fairly competitive, especially in terms of CPU performance versus a lot that's out there. Yeah, I agree, HC1M7. $799 is now pretty good for the Mac Mini. I think at $700, it's still absolutely mind-blowing. So if you can get it at that price, but if you can't, $800, the MSRP here is actually quite good. And on the M4 Pro, my recommendation is pretty similar to what I've done for most products. If you can get it discounted to the previous MSRP, it's also not bad. However, here specifically, I do recommend in general waiting for the next gen, because M5 is in many ways significantly faster than M4, especially in GPU tasks, especially in stuff like AI. Zuboito joined the chat, and I think also leaving a like, because the like counter just went up as you joined, saying pew pew, yeah, haven't seen you in a while. I guess you're joining for the negative streams rather than the positive ones, but still, welcome back. Guys, we've now been streaming for about 1.5 hours. I want to remind you to leave a like if you haven't yet done so, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more, share the video out with anybody who you think might enjoy it as well, help us grow the community, comment. You guys see, I love interacting with a lively live stream, getting your agreements, your disagreements, your opinions and suggestions in general. You can also leave a super chat or super sticker to help me along. Yeah, you guys know the drill. What else? The Mac Studio. Damn. The Mac Studio. Zuboita, by the way, do you think it's a good time to buy MacBook Air? Yes, but not at the MSRP. Look at something that brings it close to the previous MSRP. You missed that part, right? Again, previously you could get this for $949, but yeah, don't get it at this price. Also, with the MacBook Air, I highly recommend you can look into the M4 generation and not lose much, would be my recommendation here, right? Like, you get slower storage. Obviously, I do not say you can get even cheaper if you buy the M4 with 256 gigabytes, but that's a different discussion. I really recommend usually getting 512. You do not get the N1 modem, but overall, if you can save another $200 to get the M4 MacBook Air, that I think would still be worth it. Yeah, I can get for 1,000 euros for M5 Air. Yeah, I think that's a good deal. I think that's a good deal. Is it worth spending just to downsize my PC from ATX to, I assume you mean micro ATX? Oh, wait, what are the ATX sizes, right? It's ATX, and then it's mini ITX, it's micro ATX, and it's pico ITX, right? Yeah, we are gonna get to mini ITX. Yeah, mini ITX, that's about like this. That's like 2 Mac Studios, like if you put them like on the side here and then put maybe even 3. And then micro ATX is like sub Mac Studio, but larger than Mac Mini, I would argue. Oh, these are the boards. Wait, mini ITX is smaller than micro? Wait, that's crazy. That's the wrong way to... Okay. Okay, good that I looked it up. So micro ATX at that point, I don't know. Like I just would never sacrifice upgradability and like how many PCIe slots I have, how many NVMe drives I have. I mean, these are all the benefits of the PC platform. I just told you how much cheaper it now will be to configure the same storage configuration on a PC. Well, here you are losing those benefits simply by the virtue of having fewer slots, which means you would now be forced to get like 8 terabyte modules, or you would have to here like use one of the PCIe 16x slots for GPU and then repurpose one through an adapter to work with an NVMe drive, while most standard ATX boards will actually give you 2 PCIe 5, or what many will do from what I've seen is they will give you one PCIe 5x4 M.2 slot and one PCIe 4 M.2 slot, while by mini ATX you'll just end up with one M2 drive slot, and micro ATX might be 2, but then maybe not all of them will support PCIe 5. So I'm not sure. I think I can get M4. Yeah, M4 750. That's a great deal. Now that's though probably with 256 gigabytes. So in that case, really inform yourself. If it's 512 gigabytes, my recommendation is buy it now. Leave the stream and buy it now, right? But if it's 256 gigabytes, then inform yourself how much more it is for like one with 512 gigabytes or something like that. But speaking of PCs, let's talk about Apple's PC in the lineup. Jesus. Yeah. This one is so fucking annoying. Okay, KSP, I'm glad I was able to answer your PC question. That's definitely, I guess I still got it. The Mac Studio. Let's deal with the Mac Studio, because that one is absolutely hilarious. Now let's deal with the Mac Studio that is still okay first. And that's the M4 Max version. Because M4 Max is one generation behind. It still has a faster single-core CPU than anything else on the market in a way. Wait, what? 64? Wait. Oh, okay, you cannot get it with 64. Man, I had hoped that Apple would return some configurations, but man, why is Apple still like torturing us with the fucking M3 Ultra? Can Apple even get supply for the fucking 6400 megatransfers per second memory on this? Why? Apple is probably paying a premium for that old memory because probably everybody else wants at least like 7500 megatransfers per second, right? Even fucking Nintendo on the Switch 2, which uses a 6400 megatransfers per second configuration for its memory, mind you. It's software downclocked. It uses 8533 memory, the same memory as on the M4 Max. Nobody bothers with 6400 megatransfers LPDDR5, which isn't even LPDDR5X. Why is Apple still doing this? I know it's like at this point, I would have just cut this configuration from existence. Like it coming in below 128 gigs of RAM, it is even useless for AI. It does not have the AI accelerators of the M5. It does not have the raw amount of memory that the previous 256 and 512 gigabyte configuration could actually use as advertisement. It does not have the full efficiency integration and higher RAM capacity of an M5 Max MacBook Pro with 128 gigabytes. Mind you, that M5 Max MacBook Pro, because of its much more AI optimized architecture, will likely in most cases match or exceed the AI performance of the definitely of the binned M5 M3 Ultra Max Studio, but probably also of the unbinned one. Plasma Void, dang, wild increases overall. Look at those studio increases. The studio increases, again, this is actually the exact increase that I expected. This is, I did the napkin math in my head one evening when I was bored. And I was like, look, this is a product that will become 25% more expensive. like they could have done like $23.99, but honestly the people who are buying this don't really care about $100 more or less at this point. However, the actual configuration does bother me a little bit, right? Because oh, okay, so you get 64 gigabytes and the fully unbinned chip, and how much is that now? $34.99. That the reason why I'm okay with this price, I'm not okay with this price for the M4 Max, but if you just slide in the M5 Max and make it cost $34.99 here with 64 gigabyte, but 512. Nah. I thought it was 1 terabyte. Yeah, 3800 for 1 terabyte configuration. That one is getting pretty iffy at this point. I'm now appreciating even more the repairs Apple carried to my M1 Max, going to last even longer. 16-inch, that's nice. I have the 14-inch version. Afternoon too as well. I can't even imagine what they wouldn't have done to the Mac Pro. Well, the issue is, my speculation is they wouldn't have actually done that much more to the Mac Pro, because mind you, the Mac Pro would have had the exact same issues based on the same chip and same memory and everything, right? In fact, percentage-wise, it would actually end up being a smaller price increase. At $500 to a $2,000 configuration, or okay, let's look more at the higher-end configuration, right? In the previous Mac Pro that matched the Mac Studio, that was the M2 Ultra versions. The M2 Ultra Mac Studio cost $399, just like this, and then the Mac Pro was $699.99, right? So it was $7,000, so it was $3,000 more expensive. If you add the same $1,300, that's a way smaller percentage increase, because it is 75% more expensive than a similar configured Mac Studio. Now, let's say Apple would have even gone crazy and added $1,500 to it. That actually would have ended up a better increase in a way. So yeah, but obviously the Mac Pro just never made sense. This is the one product here that is on the same level to me as the iMac, but the iMac, I would actually argue, suffers from its overall form factor. It's 24 inches. It does not have even the base configuration comes with like one fan, right? With the way Apple is pricing the iMac, and clearly has priced it all along, with even $12.99 not being acceptable to me, the iMac was the worst product here and is the worst product, I would argue, even with the price increase. But that obviously is irrelevant, because I do not recommend the iMac and I do not recommend the M3 Ultra Mac Studio. In fact, I would argue the M4 Max Mac Studio got its value increased here relatively by the M3 Ultra becoming so bad. But like even here, with like Apple could have done some stuff here, right? With the M3 Ultra, why is there still a binned and an unbinned version? Like, especially for $1,500, you could have at least cut off that stupid binned version. Sorry, I caught a fly mid-air. Apologies for slightly off topic, but how's GG Beta 2 treating you? Actually, really well. The indexing is now fully done, but it's not just done. Now I'm actually getting all the benefits. So searching, for example, in Spotlight Search, I'm not going to open Spotlight Search because that one is might show personal data or anything. That one is now 2 to 3 times faster. Like, I really mean it. It's like apps and files show up instantly in the new Spotlight Search. It's crazy good. I thought that for this kind of experience, I would have to wait for like a PCIe 5 storage Mac, or for something with faster single core performance. But no, it's absolutely instant. The app library, or does it have a special name? Is it still Launchpad? No, it's just called apps. Yeah, that one loads up everything instantly and scrolls super smooth, does not have to reload the icons, which honestly this should have never been an issue to begin with, but this is now solved. The only major issue that I've had with GG is the issue that when you open up your MacBook, you remember like that Craig Federighi meme where he opens it up and it's instant wake, instant on and everything, right? And I was saying like what I was seeing, sorry, my brain is really mush because of the heat and constant dehydration today. My Mac on GG Beta 1 was actually taking like 10 seconds to wake up. And instead of waking up even to the to at least I would be able to type in my password, it would legitimately hang. So it would take 10 seconds before I could start typing in my passwords. With GG Beta 2 on the first day, it actually changed to like 5 seconds or something like that. But then now it actually has started without an issue the last time I opened it up. So seemingly this is something that has kind of fixed itself, not fully on GG Beta 2, but it's much better than GG Beta 1. Aaron recommending get an M4 MacBook Pro on eBay. Honestly, yeah. But eBay is always... eBay depends on what you mean, right? If you're looking at an official reseller through eBay, yes. If you're looking at somebody selling you a used product, first my question is how many good M4 MacBook Pros would even be on eBay? It's just a last gen product. Like how many people are already getting rid of their M4 MacBook Pros? Like, do you think all of them have gotten M5 MacBook Pros? But whenever you're looking at like a literally used market, so no refurbishing process, no extra warranty, I really require people to ask a huge discount before they agree to something like that. There is a reason why people say that once a car goes off the parking lot, it costs 50% less. I understand that's not true. Obviously, it has to add a little bit of mileage to lose that much value. But that's because you simply don't know what has happened with a car that has been off the lot, right? Not the parking lot, the sales lot. You know what I mean, right? And the similar thing with the MacBook Pro. You don't know how much shit it has even taken in. Like maybe somebody lived in a household full of cats and it's now internally full of hair and Apple doesn't have a filter in there, so over time it will clog, and unless you're willing to clean it, you'll have to find some other way to do it. So there are small things that maybe it has occasional issues, but they just escaped your notice while you were checking out the product for the usual 10-minute that you will take for such a deal, right? But you didn't notice that maybe one of the speakers has crackling issues for sometimes, right? I think a good friend of the channel had that issue where it wasn't always easy to replicate, but the speaker had crackling issues, and they sent their MacBook actually twice to repair it to the Apple Store. M5 Max MacBook Pro has more RAM than the Ultra Max Studio. Yes, and even when you look at the raw tech specs here, right? For the Mac Studio, it's not just because at least with a big chip, it could have other benefits. But look, it has 820 gigabytes per second of memory on an old architecture while being also partially limited by Ultra Fusion, right? If you compare that to the MacBook Pro now, why does it always take so long to load the tech specs portion? Right, that one on the unbinned version, which is obviously what you would be getting if you're comparing it to the Mac Studio now. Wait, did I skip it? Wait, does it not comment on the memory bandwidth? Oh, it comments on it under the chip, not under the memory. That's interesting. That one has 3/4 of that memory bandwidth. And again, this is a chip that's not limited by Ultra Fusion. It is not a monolithic die. It does require chiplets, but it's not as limited as the previous Ultra Fusion architecture. Uh, and obviously, it has an architecture that has way better hardware accelerated ray tracing. It has a next generation of mask shading support. It has a next generation of dynamic caching. It has way better AI acceleration. And still, to some people, I would actually recommend maybe even waiting for M6 Max, right? Because I think that the M6 Max is very likely to include something like native hardware-based FP8 or even FP4 acceleration, which could potentially double or even more increase its AI capabilities. And again, I'm not saying all of you are buying this for AI, but it has its uses and people will buy it for that. But yeah, this is really, the Mac Studio here is absolutely laughable in comparison. Like, if Apple had increased the prices by $500 here, again, still with M3 Ultra, I just don't recommend getting it in general, but it's an absolute joke. And in every conceivable manner, you should get the M4 Max instead. Wait. Wait. Oh yeah, yeah. I was like, wait, why does it have half the memory? Because it has half the memory bus, but it has faster memory. This is 8533 memory. This is 6400. But yeah, on the configurable version, this is 546. Much nicer. Much more relevant in the current environment, and also architecturally gonna help it get close to the M3 Ultra. Not beat it necessarily, but still, yeah. Yeah, the M3 Ultra is stupid. It's just completely stupid here. One product that, honestly, I haven't recommended much before. It was always too expensive, and I actually think that Apple should have not increased its price, not without actually more meaningful changes to its configuration, and that is Apple Vision Pro. That is ridiculous to me. Specifically, oh God. Okay, I can still see the prices, thankfully. So you can see that the prices for the 1 terabyte has gone up a lot. Like, at least for that price increase, Apple should have given you 512 gigabytes. To be honest, Apple should have given you the 1 terabyte. This is stupid. This product does not cost this much to produce, especially not with 16 gigs of RAM, 256 gigs of storage. We know the M5 chip is not that expensive. We know the R1 chip is expensive, but not that much. We know the micro OLED screen is expensive, but mind you, again, this is a screen that now Apple has been using for 2 generations straight, for 3 years straight. So obviously, it has come down in price enough to actually warrant a price reduction, but definitely to compensate for any kind of price increase. This is the product where I actually think that it was already bad. The only thing that I have to say, hey, if Apple is willing to increase the price on it, I wonder if there is enough demand, like not sell out demand, good, right? But maybe enough nerds keep buying it. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I'm a nerd myself, right? But maybe enough of a special niche audience keeps buying it, and Apple just don't expect that audience to care about an extra $200. But yeah, also, just for logistical reasons, I think this device should only exist in the 1 terabyte configuration. Or if you want to actually make it somewhat super configurable, make it 512 gigabytes and 2 terabytes, right? That way, the ones who get it with 2 terabytes actually can use it very extensively for developer purposes and things like that. While everyone who just wants to take it on a flight, maybe they don't need 1 terabyte, they wouldn't care about it, but in some cases they would want more than 256, so they would still feel happy with 512 gigabytes, and if that means saving $500, they would actually accept that quite nicely. But this way, no, the configurations are just stupid. AVP has only the M5 chip, yet it costs so much more than the MacBook Air. Yes, but it has an extra chip, obviously, right? If we look here, so there is a reason why it is more expensive, obviously. The screen is way more expensive. The form factor is smaller production, so Apple has to So Apple doesn't benefit from the economy of scale as much as they do on like a MacBook Air. That's understandable. But then they have the R1 chip, right, which is built for this like super low latency. It has its own memory interface, and I think it has 2 GB of its own memory or something like that. So that way the M5 is not actually overburdened. But my question here is also like, this is an M5, but with 16 gigs of RAM, right? And with 256 gigs of storage. I'm not even sure if the 256 GB configuration can get all the storage speed that we know the M5 chip can utilize, because every other M5 device starts with at least 512 gigabytes. So I'm not sure if on the 256 GB configuration, this might be using half the memory, half the storage modules. This should have 24 gigabytes of RAM, preferably 32. Mind you, this device is built to create a giant theater interface for you, basically. Keep dozens of apps open anywhere in your three-dimensional space, right? And it's designed for even high-performance games, whether it's 3D or more likely 2D, but played kind of like in the 3D way, right? This configuration, this is my problem. I don't even think the pricing is all the issue. It's the value of the price. If Apple wants to make this a really hardcore developer / enthusiast product, then in my opinion, it should have gotten ports of more extensive Mac apps, right? It should have 50% to twice as much memory, and it should have probably like 4 times the base storage. 24 gigs, 1 terabyte is the sweet spot. Absolutely. I mean, at that point, we are really splitting hairs. If Apple gives you 24 or 32 gigs of RAM, honestly, at that point, I don't actually think the experience would be that much meaningfully different. It would probably only really matter if you end up running apps like Final Cut locally on device rather than streaming it from your Mac, right? Plus, Apple can also take the load off of the device even further in the future with something like a more powerful R2 chip, with even more memory bandwidth, with even lower latency, with potentially 4 gigs of its own memory or something like that. So yeah, that's absolutely possible. I think this device essentially uses basically kind of HBM memory, right? They use LPDDR, I think, but it's basically configured like HBM here for that massive memory bandwidth. Yeah, but again, I also think this product in general needs a few upgrades, like give us 100% DCI-P3, give us a better quality video mirroring. And I'm not just listing it because it's there, but in general, I think that a lot of people have asked for this. One thing that I've seen with the display is that the field of view should be improved, right? Again, these are small changes. None of them would break the bank, but if you really want us to pay as much or even more for the AVP than many people have already done, you should give us a better AVP. And then while you're at it, please make it black. Like, you clearly had a model of that in testing. I like the clean aluminum look, don't get me wrong, but plenty of people will say space black or matte black, all the things, and will potentially be tempted to get it in black, which will also benefit other people, because if those enthusiasts will now feel forced to upgrade their M2 AVP to an M5 or M6 AVP that also happens to have a new design, right? Let's say it's black, and let's say it just has a wider field of view. Well, that also means that M2 AVPs will now be freed up on the market much more. You can also increase resolution. The resolution is fine. It's obviously Retina level, but it could use a little bit higher. The cameras is actually where the resolution increase should happen, in my opinion. But it's not bad. Again, it should just be either cheaper or better. Yeah. Which, I guess you could even say the same thing about the iMac, right? But I would argue with the iMac, it's just not a great product in general if we're looking at if this was a 27-inch model with 512 gigabytes, with all the Thunderbolt ports, with the with other ports as well, right? Ethernet. You don't even need to build it into the adapter. Build it into the actual freaking product, right? I think that would be fine. Obviously, I'm asking for essentially a $400 price reduction just versus the current iMac, plus another $200 or $300 worth of it's a larger device. But it could make sense, but I just don't think that. I think that for most people in the future, a Mac Mini and an external screen will make more sense. And the Vision Pro, that one needs to be like $2,000 to actually start addressing a much larger audience. But for that, it actually needs completely different specs, because I'm also not naive enough to think that Apple could offer this AVP at $2,000. Man. It is also of note that the 256 gigabyte. Wait, no, the Mac Mini is bad now. Oh no, I missed that. Jesus, I think I actually confused you guys as well with that, because I thought that the base Mac Mini had not gone up in price. Wait, why did they not mention it then? It is also of note that the 250 is now available again, but for $799. That's a price increase. You don't put that into an extra freaking line. Oh no, the Mac Mini, I'm sorry. That one actually sucks now too. It sucks as much as the problem is it wouldn't suck if it was an M5 version, right? Yeah, I missed that. It's now 16 gigs, but it's 256. It should be 512, yeah. But now that means the 512 gigabyte version is 25% more expensive than it was before. That's on the higher end of the increases that we have discussed today. Oh, damn. Oh, God. Apple, that's the problem also with changing everything at once. Of course, some shit will slip through the cracks, and it will create the wrong perception of some products might look worse than they otherwise are. Like, I would argue the iPad Pro might look worse than it actually is, but this actually looked way better. But you did that. Why did you bring back a 256 gigabyte configuration? Who the fuck wants a 256 gigabyte Mac Mini? That's just not how people use desktop PCs. I understand the idea is like, well, if I buy it for my grandma who only uses it on for like AOL, LOL. What? No, that's stupid. Don't buy the Mac Mini for that. Like, no, that actually. Because the percentage-wise, that's just a huge increase. When you think about the previous 256 gigabyte configuration before it was actually taken off the market, that's now a 33% increase. That's actually more in line with how much the base iPad has gone up in price, right? One of the more significant increases. So I apologize for misleading you before. Oh, damn, that's so stupid. No, like at this point, like seriously, guys, what Apple should have done at that point is bid the sour apple, forget the 256 ever existed, and offered 512 if they really felt the need to increase prices at $899, right? Like, I would have preferred for it to stay $799. Hell, I praised it for $799. At this point, though, I have to say I don't recommend the Mac Mini either, because I do recommend now waiting for how much it will cost with M6 or M5. Preferably M6, to be quite honest, though. Now, because I feel like to justify this price, it better have a multi-generational performance increase. And the 2nm chip with WMCM RAM packaging and everything, that will be much more... that will have much more memory bandwidth, that will have more efficiency. That one could actually justify the price. M5 would be somewhere in the middle, but now with M4, I would argue the prices are not justified. Man, if Apple had refreshed the products, but we know that the refreshes are coming in the second half of the year, so I mean, that's happening in a week, but obviously I don't mean 1st of July. Damn, that is actually a disappointment. I actually thought it was better value than that. I apologize for misleading you before. Who of you said that the Mac Mini is a great deal? I think somebody even posted that. Less storage, slower. Yeah, Zuboy, you were commenting on the MacBook Airs. Things. One of you commented on the Mac Mini being a good deal, but that's probably because you also got my take. So, and while I appreciate you listening to me, please correct me when I'm wrong. I see somebody posted a message but then deleted it. Okay, that's fine. uh, HTC, oh, HTC, you said it. Okay, now you take it back. Well, now we both take it back because it's not terrible value. It's not iMac level stupid, though now that explains a little bit the iMac pricing more because obviously that's now the Mac Mini plus a screen. But damn, this is Tim Cook pricing. I wonder if there is a little bit of like a switcheroo here, and they want to have not just John Turnus not introduce price increases, which obviously he now won't have to. They could easily even increase some of those configurations and still be plenty profitable. I wonder if they are trickily planning for Turnus to also introduce some price reductions. Because again, this happens, or greater value adding, right? Like let's say with M5, the prices are what they are here, but then M6 comes along and it actually gives you 512 gigabytes for $800, right? Maybe M7 comes along and now it gives you 512 gigabytes for $700. It's possible, but yeah. Speaker SAP, check out the news from German about the new upcoming chips. Oh, did something leak? To get AI-focused M7 chips as Apple skips high-end M6. Ooh, we have some chip news. Thank you, Speaker. Yeah, Final Fantasy VII is great. I assume you mean the remake. It's fantastic. I know this is a real Hamza. I know this is unrelated, but give the Quran a read. I've already told you, Hamza, you already joined my stream. I told you I already have read the Quran. I'm not even saying that jokingly to make you disappear. I was together with a Muslim girl for quite a long time. I read the Quran in its freaking entirety, minus some chapters that were exceedingly boring. Yeah. Parts where I knew that nothing was happening. So you can relax, Hamza. I have read the Bible, the Quran, and the Torah, or the Talmud. Maybe if Tim Cook leaves, we may get a fewer price. Nah, the problem is, don't forget, there is so much pressure coming from the board and everything. So now that we have dealt with all the negative stuff here from the prices, let's actually get to something cool. Apple is changing its Apple Silicon launch timeline to speed up the debuts of chips designed for AI workload. Oh, so M7 is going to have the FP4 and FP8 acceleration. M6 is probably going to add 20% more GPU cores and faster memory bandwidth from the WMCM packaging and the larger memory bus. Oh, that's the lineup. That makes sense. Okay. Apple plans to release an M6 chip for entry-level Macs as soon as this year, but it has canceled plans for higher-end M6 Pro and M6 Max chip. Instead, Apple's next Pro and Max chips will be part of its M7 chip lineup. With the wait, does it mean? Okay, now I'm very interested. M7 comes in. Oh, now that means I'm definitely skipping M6. Plus, wait, no thanks on reading that. Thanks, though. Yeah, I was just commenting on Real Hamza. I'm not telling the other guys here. I had a very nerdy phase where I read a lot of philosophy, everything from Marx to John Stuart Mill. I've read the major monotheistic religious texts. I was a big nerd in that way. Now I'm living much more relaxed. I'm still reading philosophy, but less so religion. Guys, we're about 2 hours into the stream. We have some new people coming in, or some people who have not commented as much before. Please, if you're enjoying the stream, like the video, subscribe to the channel, share the video out with anybody who think might enjoy it. Let me know what you agree with me, what you disagree with me about. Share other suggestions and general comments in the live chat, and feel free to make them a super chat or super sticker to support me directly. You can also become a channel member here on YouTube or support over on Patreon to make it so. And beyond all that, join my Discord, follow me on Twitter. You'll find the links to that in the description below. So if the M6 is like the Pixel 5, then the M7 is the Pixel 6 Pro. I forgot that happened with the Pixels, to be honest. That's an interesting comparison, but I guess it's kind of applicable. Okay, so let's start with here. M6 chips coming to entry-level Macs, which I assume means MacBook Airs and MacBook Pros. That also means hopefully the M6 is actually a decent enough uplift. No M6 Pro, no M6 Max. Yes, Plasma Void, I agree fully. This lineup makes me want to stick around with my M5, with my M1 Max even longer. In fact, end of 2027 sounds like the perfect time for me to upgrade. My MacBook Pro will be exactly 6 years old. It will be the second generation with a touchscreen and everything. It's going to be mwah. Okay, so we're getting the M7 lineup starting 2027 with the base M7 coming early. But now the question is, what does that mean for the upcoming tandem OLED MacBook Pro? How will Apple handle that? Because if there's only M6 around, does that mean that we'll get, look, M5 Ultra launching late 2026, that's not surprising to me. Very clearly, M5 Ultra is coming. But I'm really now interested, what does that mean for the more expensive MacBook Pros and stuff? M5 Ultra may actually be very powerful. It could be. I mean, it will be basically two M5 Max, which are incredibly powerful chips. Utilize your Apple Pay Keeper if you're paying for it on a product you want to last. To be honest, Apple stuff hasn't really broken down on me. I know it's not like a knock on wood. I don't want to jinx it, but I have been fine without Apple Care for decades now. I guess I will only upgrade from my M5 MacBook Pro in 2032. Well, that's a different, consideration. Okay. Apple is speeding up development on M7 chips because they have technologies supporting on-device AI and GPU-intensive software. So my guess here is we are getting hardware-accelerated FP8 and FP4. This is something that Apple now allows in software after the recent changes. What is it, Metal 4.1 or something like that? This is not, it does not have hardware acceleration on M5. My hope was it would come with M6, but seemingly M6 will be a better M5 on 2 nanometer. There will be plenty of new stuff on it, but the GPU will most likely be roughly the same architecture. And yeah, M5 Ultra, even if it's not perfect, will be a massive upgrade over M3 Ultra, and in fact at $5,300 it actually will look quite decent in comparison to certain like big GPU setups and things like that. Battery replacement, but even then, like I've never like I think maybe European stuff is generally like more okay with replacing stuff, and usually I will be fine with paying decent amount for like a battery replacement on a product where maybe the warranty is gone, because it's still going to be cheaper than paying for Apple Care for all that time. But now that means M7 Ultra, which is now coming 2028, that is a full multi-gen, which means that Apple might now plan, this could be the main takeaway here, Apple might plan to actually launch Ultra chips only every other generation. That would be, but my question is, what will Apple do with, like, how will they advertise a MacBook Pro with tandem OLED if the base version comes with M6, but the upper versions come still with M5 Pro and M5 Max? In my opinion, that will make those versions quite unattractive. I'm really happy with my M1 Max now, because if that one lasts me nicely up until end of 2027, and hey, by end of 2027, maybe the AI bubble will have finally popped, and maybe prices will not come down, but maybe we just get at least more for the same price. That would be quite nice. Um, since the launch of the first Apple Silicon chips, Apple has always had at least three variants, including the base M series chip, a Pro, and the Max chip, but obviously also Ultra. M1, M2 all had Ultra chips already. It just took a while for them to come out. The M6 will mark the first time that Apple is not coming out with a Pro or Max chip for the line. Apple could update the entry level MacBook Pro with an M6 chip as soon as this year. Oh, this is an interesting spec point. 200 gigabytes per second of memory bandwidth, that's 1/3 more. That would require using very different memory or a larger memory bus plus faster memory. I would expect Apple to move from 9600 mega transfers per second to 10,700, but that's obviously like a 10-12% increase. That would not be enough to go from 153 to 200, but maybe also Apple goes from like 128-bit bus to 160 or something like that. Obviously, if we're talking 192-bit bus, that would now be a much larger jump in memory. That would be 240 this gen, but they're saying M6 is expected to give you 240, which I would assume this kind of difference primarily comes from this using the last and latest LPDDR5X, which is 10,700. This DM7, which most likely utilized LPDDR6 memory, probably at like beyond 12 gigabytes per second or even like 13, 14, something like that. 160-bit LPDDR5X 9600 is the memory they already use. 160-bit 10,700. So exactly. You calculated, speaker. Thank you. Does it say Spielka? Rather than speaker? Yeah, I think so. So if it is 192 with 160-bit on 9600, can add to that like 12% more from 9600 to 10,700, and you get somewhere around 210, right? Or actually, yeah, around that. Because if it's saying around that, I would assume there is some wiggle room, right? Exactly how much it is. I mean, this could be 210, this could be 250, 260. This could be 190, this could be 230. HTC One M7, I actually have to go to sleep now. Well, I've now been streaming for well over 2 hours on a day. I didn't even want to stream at all, so I will be wrapping this up soon, but thank you so much for joining. Plasma Void, lol, M1 Max with 64 gigabyte gang, let's go. I actually only have 32 gigabytes, and to be honest, I'm quite happy with it. I wasn't going to overspend for 64 gigabytes, and I'm happy I did not, because so much that I do on my M1 Max, if I actually hit a bottleneck, it has more to do with either raw performance or more likely architectural support, like hardware acceleration or later generation neural accelerators. And 64 gigabytes would not actually help me. And yes, Plasma Void, I fully agree. They're still great. H21 M7, I can't wait for M7. Well, after this, I'm like, look, I would have expected M7 Pro and M7 Max by the end of 2027 anyway, right? So that's not the big thing here. But M7 in the first half of 2027 actually could also point to another product to get the M7 rather than the M6. You want to guess which product I mean? Somebody in here who wants to guess? While I also quickly look up, Bloomberg says the M6 will also include an updated memory architecture and an upgraded neural engine. Oh, that makes sense. So they could give you hardware accelerated FP8 and FP4, but on the neural engine rather than the GPU. And a redesigned GPU with up to 12 cores. So that's nicely. Prior rumors, performance improvements across all of the processor cores, and it's all 2 nanometer. And I guess M7 is just going to be to be exactly KSB. You guessed it correctly. The product that I meant that could be a good candidate for a first half of 2027 upgrade with an M7 chip would be the iPad Pro. Because mind you, we already have precedent for the iPad Pro jumping a chip generation when the M2 iPad Pro was not updated to the M3 iPad Pro and only was updated when the M4 iPad Pro came along. Obviously, then it also got a redesign, it got tandem OLED, it got plenty of reasons to wait. But yeah, pretty good. If Gurman's timeline is accurate, then I don't see the M7 being made with Intel fabs. What Intel node? I guess the only node somewhat possible would be 18AP, because like 14A could work here, right? But first half of 2027 would be 18AP. 18AP could be close to the efficiency of 2 nanometer, maybe in some ways, but it will definitely be less performant. If you look at Panther Lake single core performance, like unless it's really all to blame on the on the CPU architecture from Intel, it really is garbage performance, right? Like under 3,000 points in Geekbench single core. Look, I know that they are power like limited, but mind you, they perform on the level of an M3, sometimes a bit less, unless we're talking about the highest end Panther Lake chip, on an 18A node, on a node that's by its branding is supposed to invoke the idea that it's actually better than 2 nanometer. Yeah. With M7, with this timeline, I could though. Oh, that's why it's happening. Oh, that's why it's happening. Now I get it. So this is going to be 2 nanometer. This is the chip that, mind you, was kind of scheduled in some ways for last year. Or for DM5, so not like 12 months before this, but like whenever DM5 came around. Because that's a little bit similar to what happened with the A17 Pro. Because when, or it's what happened with the A16, where the A16 architecturally versus the A15 wasn't actually that much better. But it was still a node improvement. It jumped from 5 nanometer to 4 nanometer because TSMC had a slightly newer node. But Apple actually wanted, by the time the A16 came out, actually wanted to jump to 3 nanometer. But that was delayed, and that's why the A17 Pro came out. Now, we know that AMD, MediaTek, and I think both Intel and Qualcomm, they all have orders for TSMC's N2P node. So half a generation better than N2. We are most likely looking at like a 5% improvement, whether we're looking at clock speeds or efficiency. This is not a huge improvement. It's also not going to make up for differences like the introduction of WMCM on Apple's side. But still, that would mean for the very first time in forever, somebody uses a newer TSMC node than Apple. But seemingly the M7 is going, I would basically bet money on it being an N2P node. And one thing that I could also see at that point is I could see M6 and M7 existing simultaneously in the lineup, right? Where we wouldn't get an M7 MacBook Air, but we could get an M6 MacBook Air, and by the time it gets updated, it would not. We would start seeing a differentiation in processor generation between the MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro, and that would be basically the start of that. At least that's how I see it. Because if it's updated in the first half of 2027, that means we could get a MacBook Pro with the M6 in late 2026. Who knows? Maybe a Mac Mini or an iMac as well, right? But then the premium products quickly get upgraded to the M7, and Apple's M6 supply then gets used for cheaper products, especially like the MacBook Air. This actually is not bad. My only question is, what about the tandem OLED MacBook Pro? Because that means without an M6 Max or M6 Pro, it would have to use M5 Pro and M5 Max by the end of this year, which would suck. Yeah, this is going to be the perfect time to upgrade. Now, there will still be, obviously, that means in 2028, we would most likely see a generation that's based on TSMC's 1.4 nanometer node, or A14, or however they're going to call it, right? So it's still going to be better than N2P because it's going to include backside power delivery and things like that. But honestly, it's not going to be that groundbreaking, especially since it's still going to be tandem OLED. It's still going to be the redesign that's happening here, right? And all of these things are still going to feel new in 2027. And then in 2028, they will kind of feel a bit more mundane. So that's kind of how I see it. That's actually more than I would expect to see from Bloomberg. I assume this article is behind a paywall. Yep, it is. And it's not in the Power On newsletter, so I don't have access to it. One thing that I can do is we can see if there are even more details here. Apple will skip M6 Pro and M6 Max chips. Oh, okay, so here's the description. The M6 chip will include an updated memory architecture and an upgraded neural engine, the company's dedicated component for AI processing. So that is where I see FP4 and FP8 acceleration. That's something that Apple, as I said, has announced for software at WWDC, but now it's going to be hardware accelerated. Performance will also improve across all of the cores, by which I think he means CPU cores, which makes sense. We have now super cores, we have performance cores, we have E-cores. We could get a different CPU core layout. I could see Apple reducing the number of super cores, but also add some performance cores and give us, for example, 12 CPU cores rather than the current 10. There are enhancements coming from video encoding and decoding as well. So seemingly with the 2 nanometer jump, Apple is updating more of its architecture. Another change planned for the M6 is a redesigned graphics processing unit, with Apple having tested versions with up to 12 graphics cores. That's something that I had already commented on, 20% more GPU cores, and that's going to add a lot of value, I would say, usually to the M6 Pro and M6 Max, because now that means that these chips would have 24 and 48 cores, but those chips do not exist. Yeah, that's up from 10. The new GPU is intended to better handle the concurrent rendering demands of AI, graphics, and other tasks. Now, Apple usually does not update the GPU architecture back to back. So we got a new GPU architecture with M5. It has better hardware RT. It has way better AI compute with the new neural accelerators. So I would expect it to be mostly the same M5 architecture. But that being said, with the new memory, that alone will be a big jump. And if Apple tunes it maybe differently for 2 nanometer and extracts higher clock speeds in addition to extra cores, they could give you like 30 to 40% more performance without even without even having that much higher power draw. Yeah. Apple, however, does not plan to release any additional variants of the M6. Bloomberg says the next Pro and Max chips that Apple will materialize in the M7 gen. So a near 10-core GPU. Yeah, I would argue what I would say is what's likely to happen is that the binned M6 chip would then have 10 cores, and the fully enabled one would be 12 cores. They would probably exist in like 2 6-core clusters, and then Apple would disable 1 core per GPU cluster, and yeah, that makes sense to me. So M7 Gen gets Pro and Max chip. That's the first time this will have happened. The base M7 chip is reportedly set for as early as the first half of next year, which obviously means anything from January to June. The faster M7 Pro and M7 Max are slated for the end of next year. But that really puts into question the new MacBook Pro, unless Apple is willing to give it still M5 Pro and M5 Max, and then the base version gets the M6. And then M7 Ultra comes in 2028. That is perfectly fine. As long as M5 Ultra really launches this year, I'm fine with waiting. The M7 line is designed primarily around major advancements to on-device AI processing. My speculation here is it means brand new GPU neural accelerators. We already have better accelerators in the neural engine with the M6, but the actual, and then most likely the same neural engine, maybe slightly higher clocked on the M7, but the real breakthrough for the GPU is once again happening with M7, just as happened with M5. The base version is slated to support about 240 gigabytes per second of memory bandwidth. Finally, Apple is still working on the M5 Ultra. Today's report says Apple aims to release it as early as this year as part of a new Mac Studio. So it could happen faster. And Apple is, in addition to also, of course, meaning it could have 36 CPU cores, 80 GPU cores. That's just two M5 Maxes, but Apple has also tested support for up to 768 gigabytes of memory in the M5 Ultra Mac Studio. The component constraints could complicate this. Yes, I fully agree. And mind you, this could also mean that that's something that Apple might plan for the M5 Ultra, maybe that they put into private cloud compute on their own servers. Now, I'm not saying that obviously those will have even more than 768 gigabytes, but I just mean the memory module density that would be required to get 768. I could see that happening more for the servers, and then on the consumer side, it will still max out at 512. That being said, that is still all very welcome versus the very underwhelming M3 Ultra we have right now. And that also means, of course, that we would now be on a cycle of updating the Ultra chip only every other generation. My expectation for M8 will be that Apple will make Pro and Max chips again, and that the lack of Pro and Max chips for the M6 generation is only to blame on this 2 nanometer to N2P stuff. I mean, we can look at the TSMC roadmap if you want, right? And see how much better N2P is supposed to be. Yeah, I know. I don't just mean the time. I actually want the values. N2X versus N2P. What is N2U? Jesus. A14 versus N2. So that's a full node improvement, 25 to 30% lower power draw, 10 to 15% increase in performance. 20% increase in chip density, even higher than that for logic. I think N2P, Speaker, you're saying that N2X versus N2P, that's interesting. Power lower. N2X shouldn't technically not be actually that much more efficient. Do they not really have that? That's because that's actually after N2P. I'm so stupid. I think it's 5%, TSMC road. But I just wanted to look at the latest, right? N2P versus N2. My Mac is so freaking hot. And it's so humid because my air freshener works almost like a humidifier. It works with cold water. So it's really becoming unbearable in the room. 2 nanometer here. 2 nanometer. Do they describe it even in detail or... N2 N2P. N2P feature further performance and power benefits on top of N2. Oh, okay. Wait, we can actually play around with that for once. Okay, my search kind of broke. TSMC N2P versus N2, and we can actually ask AI. Yeah, 5% faster speeds or 5 to 10% lower power consumption than N2. Thank you. So, Spilka, you were correct, and I was correct, but I just really wanted to look it up. In fact, does it actually give me a good source for that? Yeah, kind of. Yeah, N2P, 5% performance uplift. N2P delivers an 18% speed improvement at the same power, a 30%. And logic. That's versus N3E. Yeah, and N3E is the M4, right? So it's not massive. It's definitely not massive. Yeah, but I mean, that's quite cool. That means there's really some interesting hardware. I mean, I wanted to also comment on some other stuff before this, like the iPhone Ultra 2 supposedly is already being in. Well, I assume it has been in development for a while, but now it's getting the full go-ahead. The iPhone Ultra 2 second gen white folding project has been confirmed with a high probability of reusing this year's screen. So there's already some logistical efficiency that Apple is banking on. This is coming from Digital Chat Station. But simultaneously, this source suggests that iPhone Air 2 is coming with a second camera and stuff like that, but then iPhone Air 3 has not been similarly confirmed for future development and production. And the last one is that we might get an Apple-like ring. Leaker Kozutami, who I've seen like leak one thing and I don't even remember what it was, so take that with a grain of salt. But and again, this could also be one of the multiple projects that just ends up being canceled. So I wouldn't really bank too much on it. But definitely Apple's future roadmap is quite ambitious. Let's see if there's anything more to the story that I've missed. Because then I would really need to know what it means for... No, it does not comment on the MacBook Air, because now I want to know, what does it mean for the redesigned MacBook Pro? Could it mean that it becomes delayed up until like next year with the M7 generation? But then again, we also just at the beginning of the stream, when we reacted to the iPad mini story, we saw that Samsung is already slated to produce screens for the MacBook Pro on the 8.6 generation OLED product line. So I would be very surprised if suddenly that is pushed by a full year. The only thing that would be an insane thing if it actually ends up happening. But the only thing that could make this truly insane is if, Jesus, they don't have this as a graph. No graph. I'll just open up a new story. Here, the only thing that could make this even more special, if that means M7 Pro and M7 Max could actually make its way into the first half of 2027 as well. And then Apple just delays the redesigned MacBook Pro by half a year or so. I mean, it was already initially kind of scheduled for early 2027. So what does that mean for... Because now the question is, will we actually get the tandem OLED MacBook Pro late 2026? What else would be getting the M6? I mean, we do have, obviously, products, unfortunately, like the Mac Studio, right, that have technically a higher-end chip. That's last gen. Sorry, I'm here with the Mac Mini, not the Mac Studio, right? But that's not something I would wish for the MacBook Pro, where the highest efficiency chip, the chip with the latest architecture and everything, that one is the M6 on the base version, but then the higher end versions are still M5. But I guess that's possible. I mean, with the crazy supply situation and everything, who knows what compromises Apple might be willing to make, especially as they fully focus on getting their chips to an AI compute level that can fully compete with the likes of NVIDIA. Because who knows? There have been rumors that Apple might want to sell PCC compute to other companies as AI stuff, because they have such efficient components that maybe they wouldn't sell their own chips the way that Intel and AMD do, right? But even M5 Ultra compute capacity on private cloud compute could be quite good once that becomes available. M7 Ultra, that's going to be insane, right? So who knows what we can expect. Thank you guys so much. This is why I tell you always to let me know if there's any breaking news. But now that we are 2.5 hours into the stream and we actually had no technical issues, thank God. We had tech news, and God, I'm sweating like a freaking pig, which is not actually true for pigs, but that's a different discussion. I'm really happy that I streamed today because obviously breaking news across the board for Apple, both in rumors and actual news. I'm so happy that we had a super lively live chat. Who knows, I might try to stream this week again if I feel like it, but don't forget, 35 degrees tomorrow or 34, 37 on 38 on Saturday, 38, 39, 40. I've even seen the app sometimes show 41 degrees on Sunday. And don't forget, this is a 41 degrees in a big city with a ton of concrete in Central Europe, where we don't have like air from the sea or something like that, and we don't have freaking air conditioners. I have an air freshener for like $150. I should have probably bought something better at the beginning of the year. Yeah, before I leave you guys, Plasma Void saying, great analyst as usual. Thanks. Stay cool this weekend. Be smart. Stay safe, guys. Stay hydrated wherever you are. Stay healthy. Whenever you need health tips, you can ask me too. Thank you so much. Before you leave me, I do want to remind you, please don't just comment in the live chat. Also comment on the regular video. And if you want to support me directly, leave a super chat, leave a super sticker when I'm live, leave a super thanks on the video afterwards, or consider becoming a channel member right here on YouTube. Shout out to our MacTech Pro Max members again, Steve, Max, Maximus, and Jonathan. Steve and Angelica. Right. Zuboy is saying, stay good. See you soon, I guess. Well, and that's the other part. Join the Discord. I left the link even in the live chat very early on, but you can find the links to my Discord, to my Twitter, to my Patreon, all linked in the general channel description. HTC1M7 saying, thank you for the wonderful stream. Well, thank you so much for joining. I definitely knew I had to stream today, but you guys made it extra enjoyable to me. I thought I would be streaming for 1 to 1.5 hours. It ended now being a little bit close to 2.5. So that means the world to me. You guys know how to support me. I don't have to annoy you anymore with this. And if you just joined the Discord, you will also be much better informed of when I'm actually about to stream. Because I know the notification bell, which I should tell you to hit, but it just, from everything that I've heard, it barely works. But hey, hit the notification bell. Maybe you'll be the first on this channel to let me know. And afterwards, just send me a hi or a thumbs up in the regular comment section. I promise you, this really helps with the algorithm, and that helps me attract more people to the stream, get more support, make more streams, make more videos. As I said, I am playing around with regular videos and maybe even shorts, though I haven't experimented too much with that, to give you more content down the line, but for now I was really happy to stream as well. Thank you to each and all of you, each and every one of you, whether you watched live or you're watching afterwards as a VOD. I'll try to add timestamps maybe, but this video will be exceedingly hard to divide. I mean, I guess I could just divide it between every individual product that I covered and its price increase, but there was so much jumping back and forth. Like we talked about the Mac Mini like three separate times. But maybe I'll just label the intro, the outro, and like the last news story or something like that. That's about it for today. Hopefully all that rambling still helped you. You guys definitely helped me enjoy the stream and the heat much more today. See you guys soon. As always, let me know what else you would like to see me cover. Obviously, breaking news are kind of included, but more is always welcome. And I'll see you guys then. This is MarkTech, tuning out.